The day the skies darkened. The day the skies darkened over every major city on Earth was a Tuesday. It was unremarkable in every sense until the massive ships appeared, hovering silently above the skylines of New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, and dozens of other metropolitan centers. They were not like anything humanity had ever seen. They moved with eerie precision, their size so vast they seemed to swallow entire buildings beneath their metallic shadows. The world stood still in shock. No one moved, no one spoke, and the hum of everyday life, which had once been the heartbeat of the planet, faded into an unsettling silence. In the heart of the bustling city of New York, Dr. Elena Ras, a leading biologist at NASA, sat frozen in the mission control room, staring at the monitors before her. Her coffee sat untouched, cooling beside her, as the weight of the moment pressed down on her chest. She could feel her breath quicken, but she remained silent. The alien ships didn't just appear in the sky. They were waiting. Every screen, every system in the control room blared data, flashing incoherent numbers and figures, but one thing was clear. These vessels were far beyond anything humanity had ever created. "Are they observing us?" she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Before she could process what was happening, the radio crackled to life. The voice of her colleague, Michael Rios, interrupted her thoughts. "Elena, we need you in the situation room now." She stood quickly, knocking her coffee cup to the side in her haste. The smooth ceramic shattered against the floor, but Elena barely noticed. The panic in Rios's voice was enough to send her rushing through the sterile hallways of NASA's control center. She could feel the pulse of the building, the weight of history in the air. This was it, the moment scientists had dreamed of for centuries. First contact. As she neared the situation room, Elena's mind raced with possibilities. Her heart beat with a strange mix of awe and dread. What would it mean? Would the aliens offer us knowledge, peace, or, she couldn't help but wonder, would they take what they wanted by force? She reached the door, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it on the handle. Inside, the faces of the world's leaders were grim, as she had feared. President Amelia Chen, normally composed, sat at the head of the table, her fingers steepled in front of her lips. Elena had worked with her before, but never had she seen the president look so human. There was fear there, disguised behind a mask of resolve. "Elena," President Chen's voice was firm, but there was a vulnerability that Elena hadn't heard before. "What are we dealing with here?" Elena paused for a moment, collecting her thoughts. She took a deep breath before answering, her voice steady. "Madam President, based on what we've gathered so far, these ships are not from any civilization we know. Their technology is beyond anything we have, far beyond our fastest spacecraft, or even our most advanced algorithms." She paused, searching the faces of the leaders around the table, who were all silently absorbing her words. Their arrival method suggests mastery of faster-than-light travel. And worse, they bypassed all our detection systems, as if they didn't exist. The room went deathly quiet. Elena could feel the weight of their disbelief, but more than that, she could sense their growing anxiety. The world had never been prepared for this. First contact had been the stuff of fantasy, something that might happen in another lifetime. But not here, not today. "Have they communicated any message?" asked General Curtis Walker, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, his gruff voice betraying the tension he tried to hide. "No direct communication," Elena replied, her gaze locked on the screens displaying the ships, their movement frozen in time. "They appear to be waiting, observing. We don't know their intentions yet, but this isn't a peaceful display. If they wanted to land and negotiate, they would have done so by now." President Chen turned to the team of top military advisors, her expression unwavering. "Prepare for every possible outcome," she said coldly. "We will not be caught off guard." But despite her resolve, Elena could see the unease in her eyes. It was impossible to ignore. Something deep in Elena's gut told her that this was only the beginning, and that humanity's fate rested on decisions that had yet to be made. The world's leaders, military commanders, and scientists continued their heated discussion behind closed doors. But Alina's mind was elsewhere. She stared at the alien ships, her thoughts a whirlwind of questions and possibilities. What was their purpose? Were they scouts, sent ahead of a larger fleet? Or were they waiting for someone, to step forward? Suddenly, the room's atmosphere shifted. It was subtle, but Alina noticed it. The hum of technology in the background, which had once been a familiar comfort, now felt more like a distant, uninvited guest. The screens flickered, and one by one, the large alien ships above Earth's cities shifted positions, slowly descending toward the planet's surface. It was happening. Contact. They were coming down. Hold your ground, President Chen commanded, her voice sharper now, an edge of fear creeping into her tone. We cannot allow panic to take over. Alina swallowed. Madame President, it may be too late for that. Whatever happens next, the world will never be the same. The waiting game. As the world held its collective breath, the ships hovered lower, each enormous vessel casting a shadow over entire cities. Their surfaces shimmered with a strange metallic sheen, reflecting the light in ways that defied human understanding. What was this advanced technology? Was it designed to intimidate or to communicate? For the first time, humanity was faced with an alien intelligence capable of crossing the vast reaches of space. Every country, every government on Earth watched in real time, their eyes fixed on the screens that broadcasted the alien ship's descent. In the Situation Room, Alina's pulse quickened. The air felt thick, as if every word spoken had the weight of centuries of human history attached to it. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, but never once had she imagined it would feel like this, filled with uncertainty, fear, and a relentless pressure to act. Alina, President Chen's voice broke through her thoughts. What do we do now? The question hung in the air, simple yet monumental. What could humanity do in the face of such overwhelming power? The ships had now stopped their descent, maintaining an eerie stillness over Earth's cities. The world's top scientists were scrambling to decode the alien signals that had started to flood the global communications grid, but so far, all attempts had failed. No one had been able to establish direct communication, and the ships remained as silent and enigmatic as when they first appeared. Alina stepped forward, her mind racing. The idea of confrontation was dangerous, yet the idea of allowing these vessels to remain above Earth without understanding their intentions was even more so. Humanity had always prided itself on its resilience and ability to solve problems, but this was a challenge unlike anything they had ever faced. President, Alina said, her voice firm, we have to try to communicate. If these ships are here to establish contact, then we need to find a way to speak to them, or we may never know why they've come. Chen nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing in thought. She knew what Alina was suggesting, but this wasn't the time for hesitation. Agreed. I want all communications channels open. Everything. We need to try and make contact. In that moment, Alina felt the full weight of responsibility descend upon her shoulders. She knew what was at stake: humanity's future, its survival, its place in the universe, and just as importantly, its dignity. The aliens had not come to conquer, or at least, not yet, but if they intended to do so, would humanity be ready? Meanwhile, in the control center, a team of experts worked feverishly. Alina joined them, her thoughts consumed by the impossible task ahead. The signals coming from the ships were not traditional forms of communication. They didn't resemble any language or code known to mankind. There were no patterns, no recognizably structured sequences. They were chaotic bursts of energy, some higher pitched than others, some static-filled, while others carried a strange resonance that made the hairs on the back of Alina's neck stand on end. As she analyzed the data, a sudden realization hit her. The signals were not random. They were intentional. The frequency, the pulses, they were deliberate, meant to provoke a reaction, a response. But from whom? Elena couldn't help but wonder. Could it be that they were testing us, studying us like lab rats, or perhaps they wanted something more? An answer, an invitation, or even a challenge? Elena, Rios said, interrupting her thoughts. He was sitting beside her, his hands flying over the keyboard, his face illuminated by the glow of the monitors. Take a look at this. Elena glanced at the screen. It was a fresh set of data. The pulses, which had once been erratic, were now beginning to form into a clear pattern. It wasn't perfect, but it was definitely something more coherent than before. It's a rhythm, Elena murmured under her breath. Do you think they're trying to communicate with us in sound? I think you're right, Rios replied, his voice tinged with excitement. But this isn't just any sound. It's musical, in a way. A series of tones, almost like a language we could understand if we figure it out. The air in the room seemed to thicken, and for a moment, time slowed. Was this it? The breakthrough humanity had waited for? A language, not of words, but of sound. It was something out of science fiction, but it was happening. Right here. Right now. We need to send a message back, Elena said urgently. Something simple, clear, and non-threatening. Rios nodded, already typing in the request to send a signal back to the ships. Something simple, a sequence of prime numbers. It was universally recognized, even by alien civilizations, as a foundation of logic and intelligence. Elena watched, her heart racing, as the signal was transmitted. Then they waited. The waiting game continues. Minutes felt like hours as they anxiously monitored the signal. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of machinery and the distant sound of breathing. Every second that ticked by felt more precious than the last. Would the aliens understand the message? Would they respond? Or would they remain silent, leaving humanity with only more questions than answers? Then suddenly, the monitor flickered. At first, it was just a brief blip, but then the screen stabilized, revealing a new set of data. The alien response. Elena's pulse spiked as she leaned in, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk. The data was unlike anything she'd ever seen, a complex mix of tones and frequencies, but there was something unmistakable about it. They've responded, Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. It's a sequence. They're answering us. The room erupted in quiet astonishment. Every eye was fixed on the screen as Elena's fingers danced over the keyboard, decoding the alien response. The music was more than just a sound. It was a pattern, a puzzle, a key. But what did it mean? Rios, start translating this. We need to know what they're saying, Elena ordered. We're working on it, Rios replied quickly. Give us a moment. As the team worked, Elena's mind was elsewhere. She was no longer thinking about the technicalities of the alien message. Instead, she was focused on something deeper. This moment, this exchange, it was the beginning of something incredible. It was the first step toward understanding our place in the vast cosmos. The moment the translation appeared on the screen, Elena's heart skipped a beat. The words, though unfamiliar, were simple enough. We are not alone. We are here to learn. The implications were staggering, unveiling the unknown. The room fell silent as the alien message flashed on the screen, and for the first time in history, humanity's greatest mystery, extraterrestrial life, began to reveal itself. We are not alone. We are here to learn. These words resonated throughout the control room, vibrating in the air like an unspoken truth. Elena sat motionless for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what had just transpired. For years, humans had speculated about life beyond Earth, wondering whether we were the only sentient beings in the vast universe. And now, just like that, the answer had arrived. We are not alone. It was simple, yet it carried the weight of eons of history. Elena, Rios said, breaking her reverie, his voice strained with excitement. There's more. The words on the screen shifted. The sequence of alien sounds morphed into a new, more complex structure, a series of symbols now appearing alongside the tones. Each one glowed with a pulsing energy, as if they had their own life force. The team had worked tirelessly to decode the musical sequence, but now they had to decipher something even more alien, a symbolic language. Elena leaned in, her eyes fixed on the symbols, which seemed to shimmer with an eerie luminescence. "We need to decode this fast," she said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We don't know what these symbols mean, but they might hold the key to understanding their true intentions." The work was painstaking. The alien symbols were unlike anything humans had ever encountered before. At first glance, they seemed to defy any sort of logical system. But Elena and her team were determined. They applied all their knowledge, using every linguistic and computational tool available. Hours passed in a blur, the room consumed by the glow of the screens and the soft clicking of keyboards. Outside, the world was holding its breath. Media outlets had exploded with speculation. Governments around the globe were scrambling to understand what was happening, each one hoping to secure a role in the next phase of humanity's new future. Everyone wanted a piece of the action, but Elena knew that only one thing mattered: what these beings wanted and how they would impact Earth. A breakthrough. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. As Elena continued to review the patterns and anomalies within the symbols, something clicked in her mind. She recognized a repeating geometric pattern, one that was familiar, yet somehow ancient. It reminded her of early forms of communication: cave paintings, hieroglyphics, even the digital code of early computer systems. Suddenly, she understood. It wasn't just a symbol system. It was a form of visual music, a fusion of sound and shape, both familiar and foreign. She started mapping the symbols to known elements in human mathematics and geometry. It was a long shot, but at this point, anything was worth trying. What if they're not just sending a message? Elena muttered to herself. What if they're showing us how they communicate? Not just words, but a deeper, universal language. With renewed energy, she began working with Rios, who had finally mapped the musical patterns to certain frequencies and resonance waves. Together, they cross-referenced these with the symbols, and something extraordinary began to emerge. The patterns were not only a message, but a map, a guide to understanding the aliens' approach to knowledge, learning, and perhaps even the very nature of existence. As Elena pieced the fragments together, she realized the patterns were not just confined to Earth's traditional models of communication. They transcended borders, transcended cultures. This was not a message meant for one nation or one people. It was meant for humanity as a whole. "This," Elena whispered, "this is it. This is how they think. This is how they see the universe." The symbols were connected by an invisible thread that spanned space and time. The aliens weren't simply visiting. They were trying to communicate on a higher level, one that humanity had never even considered. The first contact, a leap into the unknown. The following days were a whirlwind of discoveries, and yet there was still so much they didn't know. Governments worldwide were now fully aware of the alien presence, and diplomatic talks began in earnest. Elena was thrust into the spotlight, her every move scrutinized by the world's media. But despite the pressure, her focus never wavered from the task at hand: understanding the aliens. Then came the announcement. In a televised address that was broadcast globally, President Chen spoke to the world. Her voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable tremor in her words. She knew this was a moment of unparalleled significance in human history. "People of Earth," she began, "we have established communication with an alien species. These beings are not here to conquer, to invade, or to harm us. They are here to learn, to share knowledge, and to discover what we, as a species, have to offer." The reaction across the world was immediate and mixed. Some hailed it as the dawn of a new era, a monumental opportunity for growth and exploration. Others were skeptical, their fears feeding into long-standing narratives of alien invasion. Regardless of the initial reactions, one thing was clear: humanity was on the precipice of something extraordinary. Elena stood by President Chen's side, her thoughts racing. She had the answer, but the question remained. What now? The aliens had requested a meeting, a physical exchange. They had chosen a location, the ruins of an ancient temple in the middle of the Sahara Desert. The site was rich with cultural and historical significance, chosen deliberately. The message was clear. This wasn't just a scientific exchange. It was symbolic. The meeting would take place in a place that represented the very foundations of human history, where humanity's search for understanding had begun. With the help of the world's brightest minds, a plan was quickly formed. The United Nations, alongside world leaders and representatives, would be present at the meeting. Elena was appointed to lead the team, humanity's chosen emissary. The gravity of the decision struck her like a thunderclap. She, an ordinary scientist from an ordinary world, would stand face to face with extraterrestrial beings. What could she possibly say to them? What could humanity offer in exchange for this unprecedented knowledge? The preparations for the meeting were intense, and the world watched every step. As Elena boarded the shuttle that would take her and the other delegates to the meeting site, her heart raced. This was no longer about science or politics. It was about humanity's very identity. What would this first contact reveal about who we were and where we would go from here? An unexpected arrival. The journey to the Sahara was long, but Elena barely noticed the time passing. Her mind was consumed by the magnitude of what lay ahead. As the shuttle descended into the desert, the vast expanse of sand stretched out below them like an ocean of gold. But what caught Elena's eye wasn't the desert. It was the shadow looming in the distance. The alien ships were already there. Their metallic surfaces glimmered under the sun, their sheer size and presence taking Elena's breath away. For a moment, it felt surreal, like a dream from which she would wake any moment. But this was real. This was happening. The shuttle landed softly on the dusty ground, and Elena's legs felt like lead as she stepped out, the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her. She was no longer just a scientist. She was humanity's voice. And in that instant, as she approached the alien ships, something shifted. The sky above them darkened, and Elena felt the ground beneath her tremble. It wasn't an earthquake. It was something else. A tremor of anticipation. Something in the air was changing. The world was about to learn just how far-reaching this first encounter would truly be. The meeting in the desert. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the vast desert landscape, as Elena and the world's top scientists, diplomats, and military leaders gathered at the chosen site. The air was thick with a hum of anticipation. The Sahara, once a remote and desolate stretch of land, now felt like the very epicenter of humanity's future. It was as though the universe itself had singled out this spot for something beyond comprehension. Elena stood alongside President Chen, who was visibly tense, her usually composed demeanor strained with the enormity of the moment. The other delegates, too, seemed to be grappling with the same reality. This was no longer just a scientific mission or a political negotiation. This was a defining moment for all of humanity. And then, just as the first stars began to twinkle in the vast sky above, the alien ships moved. At first, it was a subtle shift, a shimmer of light at the horizon, barely perceptible. But in a blink, the ships accelerated, descending toward the ground with a grace that seemed to defy physics. They hovered above the desert floor, their metallic surfaces reflecting the fading sunlight, casting an ethereal glow over the sand. Elena's breath caught in her throat as the ships landed softly, kicking up a small cloud of dust. There was no loud crash, no roaring engines, just the subtle hum of something otherworldly, a hum that seemed to vibrate in her bones. The craft rested silently on the earth, their presence undeniable yet peaceful. There was no sign of weapons, no overt display of power. They were here not to conquer, but to connect. The alien beings emerged from the ships. They were tall, their elongated bodies encased in shimmering, translucent suits that seemed to ripple with light. Their faces were obscured, but their posture and movement conveyed a deep intelligence and calm. They did not walk like humans. Instead, they seemed to glide, their steps graceful and deliberate. The crowd stood in awe. There were no cries of panic, no rushing towards the ships. Everyone simply watched, transfixed, as the beings approached. The tension in the air was palpable, as if the very desert was holding its breath. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. This was it. This was humanity's first contact with the unknown. A universal language. As the alien beings drew closer, Elena stepped forward, her mind racing with everything she had studied over the past weeks. She wasn't just a scientist anymore. She was humanity's representative, the first human to meet an alien species face to face. The beings stopped in front of her. There was no verbal exchange, but the air seemed to vibrate with a strange energy. Then one of the beings raised its hand. A soft, melodic sound emanated from it, as if the very air itself was singing. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense. No words or sounds in any human language, but something deeper, more resonant. The sound reverberated within Elena's chest, as if it was communicating directly with her heart. For a moment, Elena was paralyzed. Then she instinctively raised her hand, her fingers trembling. She felt the energy in the air shift again, and the sound began to take form, becoming more structured, more understandable. Elena, Rios's voice crackled through her earpiece. We've detected a pattern in the sound. It's a harmonic frequency. We think they're trying to communicate through resonance. Elena nodded, though her mind was reeling. She focused on the sound, trying to let it wash over her, trying to interpret its meaning. She had to concentrate, to remain calm. The message was clear, but it wasn't coming in the way humans were accustomed to receiving it. It was not language as they knew it, but something deeper, something that transcended words. "I'm ready," Elena whispered, her voice steady. The unexpected response. The alien's body language shifted again, as if they had received her unspoken response. One of them stepped forward, holding what looked like a thin, transparent device in its hand. It hovered in the air, floating just above the sand. The device emitted a soft glow, illuminating the surrounding desert in a surreal light. It was then that Elena realized what they were doing. They weren't just communicating with her. They were opening a channel, a bridge, a connection that transcended language itself. The device projected a three-dimensional hologram into the air, a shimmering image that danced in front of her. At first, Elena was struck by the beauty of the projection. It showed not just an image of the alien's home planet, but an entire galaxy, a swirl of stars and nebulas, stretching outward in all directions. It was a breathtakingly beautiful sight, but what held her attention was the image of a single planet that pulsed with a soft, golden light. The alien planet. The projection shifted again, and this time, Elena saw something completely unexpected, a visual history. It showed the evolution of the aliens themselves, their species growing from primitive, organic life forms to something far beyond human understanding. But what was most striking was how they had reached this point. Through knowledge, understanding, and, above all, cooperation. The hologram flickered, and then, almost as if it were waiting for Elena's reaction, the beings extended their hands toward her, a gesture of invitation. Elena understood what they were asking. This was more than just a scientific exchange. It was an invitation to join them in their quest for knowledge, for growth, and for the betterment of all life in the universe. Her heart raced. She knew that this moment was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about understanding their technology or learning about their history. It was about something far more profound, an opportunity to join something greater than humanity had ever been a part of. The weight of responsibility. As Elena looked into the alien beings' faces, her mind raced. This was humanity's moment. The weight of history pressed down on her. But there was something else, too, something she hadn't anticipated. A sense of awe, of wonder, mixed with a profound realization. For the first time in her life, she felt small, not in a way that made her feel insignificant, but in a way that made her see the vastness of the universe, her personal ambitions, the quest for knowledge, the pursuit of understanding. It all seemed to pale in comparison to the scope of what lay ahead. But that was the beauty of it. This was humanity's chance to join something far bigger, something universal. The hologram shifted again. This time, it showed the future, a future in which humanity and the aliens were not just allies, but collaborators, sharing knowledge, exploring the stars together, advancing in ways that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. But there was also a darker undertone to the projection, a warning, perhaps. The history of the alien species had not been without conflict. The hologram showed moments of struggle, of harsh decisions, of moral dilemmas faced by their kind. They had made mistakes too. They had seen what it meant to fall into chaos, to lose their way. And it was then that Elena understood the true meaning behind their visit. The aliens weren't just offering knowledge. They were offering a chance to learn from their mistakes, to grow together, and to avoid the pitfalls they themselves had once fallen into. It wasn't just a gift, it was a responsibility. The aliens stepped back, their gesture one of respect. Elena knew that the next step was hers to take. There was no going back now. She turned to President Chen and the other leaders, her voice steady but full of wonder. "This is our chance," she said. "We can join them, learn from them, and build something extraordinary. But it's up to us to decide how we move forward. We have to be ready for the responsibility." The choice. The desert, bathed in the light of the alien ships, felt like a crossroads. The future of humanity lay ahead, but so did the uncertainty of the unknown. Elena felt the weight of the moment. The alien beings had given them an opportunity, but it was up to humanity to seize it, and to shape the future with care, wisdom, and a sense of responsibility. As the stars twinkled above, Elena took a deep breath. The choice before them was not just about technology or knowledge. It was about the future of humanity itself. Would they rise to the challenge, or would they falter? The answer, she knew, would come in time. But one thing was certain. This was just the beginning. The decision that would shape the future. The days following the meeting with the aliens felt like a blur. The world had never been so uncertain, yet it had never been so full of promise. Elena sat in her lab, staring at the holographic projections that had been beamed into the desert. The data was endless. Thousands of calculations and formulas scrolled across her screen, but they were just numbers, just pieces of information. The real question, the one that had burned in her mind since the aliens had first appeared, was much bigger than anything science could explain. What would humanity do with this gift? She had spent her life chasing knowledge, always believing that science would provide the answers to the universe's mysteries. But the aliens had shown her that some answers came not through discovery, but through choice. And humanity's choice was as immense as it was terrifying. Elena closed her eyes, trying to focus on the faces of those who had surrounded her in the desert. Scientists, military leaders, world diplomats, the eyes of billions of people watching across the globe. They had been silent during the encounter, but their thoughts and hopes had been as loud as the hum of the alien ships. Everyone had felt the weight of the moment, but now, as the leaders convened in private meetings, the real work began. The Council of Nations had been formed, a coalition of global leaders who would make the ultimate decision. A meeting had been called, one that would determine whether humanity would accept the alien offer or turn it away. The stakes were enormous, and Elena had been invited to speak as humanity's representative, a role that both humbled and terrified her. The Council's dilemma. The conference hall was grand, an opulent space nestled deep within a high-security facility that had been hastily constructed in the aftermath of the first alien encounter. Diplomats and generals filled the room, their faces grave as they waited for the meeting to begin. Elena sat at the table, her mind racing. Across from her sat President Chen, whose stoic face betrayed none of the anxiety she had shown in the desert. "Elena," Chen said, her voice calm yet firm, "you've seen what they offer, but we can't ignore the risks. These are powerful beings with knowledge beyond our comprehension. How do we know they won't use us as pawns in some intergalactic game? How do we know they won't push us into conflict with other alien species? Alina met her gaze without hesitation. I understand your concerns, President Chen. But the hologram they showed us, their history, their evolution, it wasn't just about knowledge. It was about the mistakes they made, too. The aliens warned us that their greatest challenge was understanding their own limitations. They didn't rise to power through domination, but through cooperation, through learning from each other. If we can do the same, we can avoid repeating their past mistakes. But another voice interrupted. They've only shown us what they want us to see. What if their true intentions are darker? What if their offer comes with a cost that we're not ready to pay? Alina leaned forward, her heart pounding. The room had grown quiet, the weight of the question hanging over them all. She had considered this possibility, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the true danger wasn't in the aliens themselves. It was in humanity's reaction. The fear of the unknown, the thirst for power, the tendency to see threats where there were none. That was the real challenge they faced. We are at a crossroads, Alina said softly, but with conviction. And the decision is ours alone. The aliens have shown us the way forward, but they have not told us what to do with it. They trust us to make the right choice, to learn, to grow, and to carry this gift responsibly. But that means we must face our own darkness too. We must acknowledge that we are not perfect, that we have made mistakes, that we are capable of greed, fear, and violence. And yet we must choose to rise above that. There was a long silence as her words lingered in the air. Some in the room seemed moved, while others remained unconvinced. President Chen turned to her, her gaze thoughtful. You speak of hope, Alina, but hope alone won't guide us. We need to know the risks. We need to understand what we're getting into. Alina nodded, knowing she had to be clear. I don't know what the future holds. None of us do. But the future isn't just about technology or knowledge. It's about who we choose to be. If we accept their offer, we are choosing to step into the unknown, to trust in something greater than ourselves. We must face that uncertainty, and we must do it together. If we fail, it won't be because of the aliens. It will be because we failed to learn from their example. The alien proposal. The next day, the leaders gathered once more. The alien emissaries had agreed to attend the council meeting, something Alina had not expected but was grateful for. As they entered the room, their presence was like a sudden shift in the atmosphere. The air seemed to hum with an energy that couldn't be ignored, as if the very space around them had been altered by their arrival. Their movements were fluid, almost graceful, and their silence spoke volumes. One of them, the leader of the emissaries, stepped forward. Its form shimmered, as though it existed not entirely within the physical realm. A soft, melodic hum filled the room as it began to communicate, not with words, but with images. The room was once again filled with a holographic projection, this time a visual representation of the aliens' home world. It was beautiful, a lush, verdant planet, teeming with life. But there was something about it that struck Alina to her core. It wasn't just the beauty of the world. It was the way it seemed to pulse with energy, as though the very essence of the planet was alive, and somehow in tune with the beings that inhabited it. It was a world of harmony, of balance, where nature and civilization coexisted in a way Alina had never seen before. Then the image shifted. The peaceful planet began to change, the land transforming into something barren, desolate, and scarred. The hologram zoomed in on the destruction. A series of wars, civil unrest, environmental collapse. The beauty of the planet was torn apart by the mistakes of its inhabitants. Alina gasped. The aliens were showing them the price of their own failures. The warning was unmistakable. This, the leader of the aliens seemed to say through the images, is what happens when we forget our responsibility to the universe, when we lose sight of what truly matters. The projection shifted again, showing the aliens' peaceful recovery. They had learned from their past, from their failures, and they had worked together to rebuild. Their civilization was once again flourishing, but this time with a deeper understanding of the delicate balance required to maintain it. Finally, the hologram turned to a final image. Earth, a small, fragile planet, floating in the vastness of space. It was beautiful, but it was also vulnerable. The image faded, and the room fell silent. The alien leader's voice resonated in Alina's mind, not through words, but through a deep sense of understanding. It was clear now. The aliens were offering not just knowledge, but a partnership, one that was not without risk, but one that held the potential for extraordinary growth. But the decision, as they had shown, was humanity's alone. The weight of the moment. Alina stood, her mind heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. She had seen the future, both the potential and the peril. The council was divided, some members eager to accept the offer, others hesitant, afraid of the unknown. It was clear that the aliens were not going to push them into a decision, but instead were offering humanity a chance to make its own choice. Outside the conference room, the world waited. Every television, every news station, every media outlet was broadcasting live footage of the council's deliberations. The entire planet had been thrust into a collective moment of uncertainty, and the eyes of billions were focused on the outcome. Alina knew that whatever decision the council made would echo through the ages, but as she looked out over the vast desert beyond, she knew one thing for sure. This was humanity's defining moment. The future was no longer just a path. It was a series of choices, each one leading to a new and uncertain horizon. As she left the council chamber, Alina felt the gravity of what lay ahead. It wasn't just about what the aliens had to offer. It was about what humanity had the potential to become. The decision would come soon. But Alina knew that, whatever the outcome, humanity's journey had already begun.